I kind of like texture pixels. Obviously, it's kind of seems kind of redundant because pixels get texture pixels. But you got to remember that pix in this context kind of means like this pixels container. So pixels container dot get subfunction texture pixels. Um, or we could call it texture pixel values. Or I don't know. Or texture pixel data. I don't really like. I try to avoid plural when I can. So texture pixel data rather than texture pixels with the S. Even though it's kind of a mouthful, right? Texture pixel data. Sure, we'll just call it that. So the adapter graphics and the pixel container. And I guess since we are kind of like abusing our spacing, we could do that. We can also indent a little bit more, right, to kind of like make these much more clearer sections. And then we can do the same thing down here. So we'll indent, and then we can copy all this, right? And we could just take the name we wrote earlier, and right, because we want everything to be very consistent, right? So same subname as the name up here. Having them match is just good, right? We want to keep as much regularity in the code as possible. And even though maybe if we were to be completely precise with our English, getting the texture, this get would be like texture upload, and the put would be, the put would be texture upload, and then the get would be like texture fetch, but then the names wouldn't match, and it's more valuable to us that the names in the code kind of match so that the patterns and connections in the code are obvious. Those sorts of things are much more important than the grammar being correct. Like, grammar is like not important. Okay, I mean, you want it to be understandable, but it's like, when somebody's first language isn't English, but you still know what they're saying. Like that type of English, I think, is perfectly fine in comments. If you wanna use bad English in your comments, like, go right ahead. Okay, so we have these functions. We can do a really quick check to make sure that they are not identical. Make sure that they're all uniquely named. So I'm just highlighting them and making sure. Okay, yeah. So those are all different names. And these functions for the texture data, or the pixel data, they don't exist yet, so we need to make those subfunctions as well. So let's go down here, and we'll say function, and then, right, we need the adapter graphics, and then we need the pixel container, right? So we're keeping that same pattern for all of the function signatures, right? So we don't have to guess at what the function signature is. It's always the same, which is the nice aspect of just basically what we're doing is all of the parameters are just always in a container, right? So that makes it more flexible. That makes the number of parameters passed. It shortens the number of parameters passed. It makes it more flexible. Like, we don't have to all these different functions. If we change what kind of data is inside this container, we don't have to change the function signatures here. Tons of great benefits. It's not always worth it to do this, right? Because it's extra effort to come up with a container. So I wouldn't say, just always do this, but it's a good idea depending on what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so we got our get and then we got our put, and right, we've been pretty much doing it get and put, right? So get and put and get and put. It kind of would make sense to maybe put the values before we get them. So maybe we should have had ordered that and put then get. But you know what? The thing is this is the order we've used, get then put, so we just want to maintain that order in the declaration. So even, right? So just having consistency. So get and put, and then it looks like the pixel location, that's caching it. So this is like a get and put for the pixel. Okay, yeah. And what we could do is we could do, I'm gonna put this in a thing called TL, because this top level is actually done. Right, because it's obviously there's really not much going on here because it's top level. It's just a high level overview of what needs to happen. And we can just write TL top level publicly exposed function. Right? Something like that. And then we have these. We're going to put these into... we can use a dash line here. Dash line. Indent to 64 columns. And this is TD for texture data, right? Or we used, that was for pixel array. I'm not going to worry about that. Sure, if I want to use TD for texture data this time, I don't know, it's not... it's not super important, you know, what these letters are, right? It's just a way to make it somewhat unique so that you're more sure that this is the top and the bottom of the same section. Alright, because if I just do this, sometimes it can be hard to be like, and somebody writes a summary, you write a summary of what's done, summary here, and sometimes you don't know, like, oh, we started a new section, and then where does that section end? And maybe it's obvious when you start writing the code, but maybe as the code base changes over time, that becomes less and less obvious. Okay, so TD, texture data. And do a throw, and we'll just do a to do, and we'll also put a throw to do in here as well. We'll copy the names of those functions. Okay, let's so I feel like we've been mucking around a lot. We shouldn't have. We haven't implemented this yet. We've just kind of like fleshed out kind of where we're going with this. But let's make sure we haven't broken anything yet, right? So let's make sure this still works. If it doesn't work, it's just a syntax. Okay, so that still works. And no real problems. We do see there is no texture bound to the unit 0, but we're only getting one of those errors. So that's because of just the order that we initialize things. The shader runs for one iteration without the textures having been loaded, but we have that guard in our shader that guards for that. So like, we don't fetch from the texture until the uniform that says the textures have been loaded is set. So we don't have to worry about this warning. Should we have programmed it in a different way where we don't get this warning at all? Yeah, usually you try to code so you don't get warnings at all. I'm not going to worry about it because I do kind of like the way I've been going about it. Maybe I'll question if that's the right way to do it later, but let's just keep on going with this. Okay. So now that that's kind of there, the next thing we need to do is the logic for the texture sampler uniform is complete. It's complete garbage. And so if we highlight this, right, we should have 3 functions that are underscore texture sampler uniform. Well, it's not complete garbage because it was written correctly to begin with, but then we kind of like changed things around a bit, so we should be able to easily refactor this into a workable state. So we have one of the things is that this we have this idea of a pixel location, and now that we've kind of like messed around, we realize we don't have anything called we don't actually have a uniform for an entire texture that's uploaded, right? We have a uniform for a texture sampler, but there's no such thing as a uniform for an entire texture, and this was supposed to be the location of a uniform associated with the texture rather than a texture sampler. So this variable is complete garbage. It's a completely bogus thing. That's because I coded this when I coded the uint32 container. I wanted to create an analogous container for pixels as well, and so I tried to just mirror all of the variable names and conventions, and this was like my kind of like guess at what it should look like, and the guess was close but not quite. So one of the things I want to do with that is pixel location. That is a bullshit variable name. If somebody types pixel location, what they actually mean is what they really want is the sampler location. They either want the sampler location or maybe the texture slot, right? Slot is bogus. You want. So I just want to make a note that that if you use pixlock, that's bogus, and what you want is either the sampler location or the texture slot. That's actually what you want if you're asking for, oh, I want the location of the pixels. The locations of the pixels, that's nonsense. You want the location of the sampler uniform, or maybe you want the texture slot that the texture is bound to. But there's no such thing as this in my conceptualization of how things are going. So it does look like previously when we were working on the code, we did document that variable name, and it's right here. Pixel data location, right? Uniform location on the GPU. So that's the intent of this variable. But it's wrong. So we could pixlock. So I'm gonna do this. Look. Bad conceptualization, C, and then we'll do the sampler location or the texture slot. Alright, so this pixel location thing, that's a bad conceptualization, and you want this or that. And then we had some notes here. We can use this message as well. Why not? Keep it. And so we will take this right here, where we did like the spell check, and and we're just going to put that here. We're going to consolidate that. And the next thing we might want to do is, if we don't already have something, that if we type pixel location, okay, so we do have something that says that, but I don't know what these guys are. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here and see what that's all about. So Control F, see what that is all about. Get pixel location. Okay, so this is get. Okay, so we'll type pixel location dash get and pixel location underscore get. So we're going to type that there. Then we're going to take this one that says pixel location, and we're gonna rip that out of there. So pixel location, and pixel location, and we'll say pick pixel location dash, and so we have that get or var name, right? And if somebody uses pixel, we could put that over here. We could put that, so pixel location and then var name, and the variable name is bogus, right? But you know, just for completeness. Okay, so pix location. Do we want to like just put that? Yeah, I don't know. Let's keep that. So let's go pix location, and pix underscore location. And maybe we want to do something like a location of pixel, and location of pixel. Okay, so now that we have that kind of sorted out, so that if somebody uses this name, we can correct them as to the errors of their ways, right? And let them know that they either mean sampler location or the texture slot. And in our code, so if we go back to our code now that we've kind of like mucked around here, we know that the location here is for the uniform for the sampler. So what we can do is we can take that out, and we know we want the sampler location, and we could do like this, like aka, right? So conceptually, yeah, this is kind of what we want, but it's not, but this isn't quite accurate enough of the variable name. But we can still keep it there. It also help us as we're refactoring, so we can double click that and see where the other offenses are. So cache uniform location if not already fetched. So that's a good idea. So this pixel location, did we do that? Yeah, so this thing called pixel location should actually be called, is actually supposed to have the same name as the variable it's caching. So that should actually be called samlock. Though you know what, I kind of get why I'm doing that, because yeah, well, yeah, that should probably be called pixlock. So we're just gonna call, we're gonna just put, I'm gonna put that up there, and we're gonna change this as well. So we're gonna just Control 0, and then we're gonna highlight all occurrences of pixel location, because that's what really needs some changing here. And we'll change that to... Well, actually, I don't know. So it's a toss-up, because really this is supposed to mean the container. I'm gonna stop recording and record another.